Hello and welcome to a premium Battlestar deck profile. So this is an early build and I've not actually had the chance to play any games with it. I've been very busy, but I wanted to sort of just give something for people to go off of. And I think the theory behind this list that I've kind of theory crafted is pretty sound to me, so that's why I'm actually putting out this video. So I've got experience playing with Battlestar in the past, which is the Amaterasu version with Fromage, and I kind of decided to kind of build based on what I know about that deck and how things have been altered to go for a more purer Battlestar lineup as well. So we'll start with Lozenge Magus. Any starter for V-Series is fine, they all do the same thing. Then 4 copies of Fromage. So this card is good if you ride it or if you place it on Vanguard because you could get to draw 2. Of course, as a ride target, you always want to ride this because it has the Battlestar's name, and your first strides before Peak Line Collection, well, your best one generally tends to be this Battlestar stride here, so the name used to matter a lot more as well for that reason too. But of course, we've now got the new stride, so it's not as big a deal if you misride a non-Battlestar, but we are still playing pure Battlestar for other reasons. So Fromage, the thing is, if you ride the new Battlestar, which we've now got a second ride target for V-Series, you can use this as a rear guard to still draw the cards anyway, so even if you misride into reverse, it's fine because you can call this once you draw into it some other way. And the good thing is she can be placed from anywhere, so if you go into the Dragon King, for example, you can still eventually just plus even more on top, like a lot of chain plussing, which is really good. Like, this is a really good grade 3 to call with the card. And Fromage is also helpful because she can build up the card economy to use Sterling Witch Momo as well, so you can of course do restands. If you have Battlestar Muffin and you say your opponent damage denied you a bit, you can always use Muffin to get your counter charge for the on attack ability and get the counter blast off to use Momo. So that's also handy. But reverse doesn't even have a constraint when your opponent's on grade 2 or less. So you can actually just go and high roll into this and do your play. You can grade 2 game as well this deck, because there's a bunch of stuff that can gain advantage in the early game as well. And reverse can pretty much just generate a lot of hand. It's quite wide as well with that. Next, we have 3 copies of Sables. So I decided not to play Battlestar Troquette in this list because grade 3 searching is not as important as it used to be. The reason why is because Goddess of the Sun Amaterasu isn't in this list, of course, but that's one of the good things to use Troquette with, which is revealing Amaterasu and binding. And then there's also the fact that you only had one Battlestar ride target. Well, you could play Florentine. Some people played Florentine as well. But the thing is that now with 2 ride targets, let's just say, that have Protect Gift that you actually do really want to ride, that kind of helps a bit because you don't actually have to go around searching for grade 3, so it's not important if you're playing a higher grade 3 Battlestar deck. Obviously, if you've played Florentine as well, technically you wouldn't have needed Troquette as much either because it's more just a case of just hard draw any Battlestar, then you're fine. And there are a lot of opportunities to keep drawing cards anyway after your ride up, even if your ride up doesn't draw you 2 cards, because Battlestar does kind of dig through deck. In fact, this card can as well. And this card can help you grade 2 game and win off advantage. If you use this with reverse, you're getting basically a free lock because all you're paying is 1 Soul Blast cost. And because of pure Battlesisters, her condition is much easier to fill as well. Obviously, the only downside is she's a 9k, so if you go against a Force deck, then it's a bit hard to swing, but you've got ways to work around that. And then there's 4 Battlestar Trifle, so she's okay if you ride it because you can use the Counter Blast to actually plus a card onto the field. Sometimes you can do chain combos as well because of on-place abilities that you place from top of your deck. And she can also stack as well. But there's also the other ability that gives her Sentinel Restrict, which can help you try and push for game as well sometimes. So that can be helpful too. Next, we have Battlestar Mocha. So this card isn't actually that much of a grade 2 gaming card because you have to ride grade 3 to actually get the advantage off of her, but the advantage is really strong. And the ability base says when rode upon, you Soul Blast 1 and you look at top 2 of your deck. You can choose a card from among them and put it into your hand, and then you put the rest. Now, this bit is another errata, so if you guys seen my video just the other day, I think basically I mentioned how there's all these erratas that have been happening lately, and unfortunately, one thing I didn't mention in the video, because there are loads of examples, I could have gone on forever, but I try to keep the video as short as I can. This is another one of the errata problems that we've got from the new set, and it's supposed to say return on the bottom or the top, but it only says bottom, so that's really bad because people are basically going to start nerfing this card when they're playing with it beyond what it's been intended to do. So it's really, really frustrating. Then we've got another card here that is also an error. And I hope they do something about it, because it's really, really serious now, this whole errata problem that we're getting in the TCG side of the game. The other skill that she has is a bit like Macaron, except it's a bit more conditional. If you have 3 or more units with Bowsers in the name, different names, that is, she gets 5k power and 5k shield, so a bit of nice shield boost is always helpful. 10k shields are quite good to have access to, and being able to inset from the board as well. And then if you have 4 or more in hand, she gets an additional 5, so she basically becomes Macaron, but better. Obviously, it's a bit more conditions, but they're not that hard to meet in this deck, so it's okay. And then we've got also Coco. So Coco is, it's kind of similar to the original. She's got an ability where you can rest her, which is kind of similar to that D-Series Divine Sister card, actually. You look at the top card of your deck, and you can put it on the top or bottom of your deck. If you put it to the bottom, you can choose one of your units and it gains 3k. So you can either stack a trigger, or you can just give out some 3ks with it, which is also very helpful with reverse, because you can lock her after using a skill, because reverse doesn't care what stand or rest position is. The same thing happened with Miranda in Dual Knights. Dual Knight Miranda, her ability literally says if you're not boosting, you can do something with it. And obviously the idea is you just boost the back row. So they've made a few support cards with the reverses where they're meant to kind of make your boosters kind of pointless, and then you just pay it off with the lock. So yeah, just a weird reverse playstyle that's been going on. But the other ability she has is that if she's rode upon, you can just get a free +1 by calling onto the board. So that's really nice. So if you ride this, you're getting a free +1, and you can get more advantage. That means you'll always have access to stacking, and you don't have to lose any cards or counterblast for it. So that's really good. And yeah, helpful around. Next we have 4 copies of Torijas. This is free. It's basically in the main style hard once per turn. It's on plays, you look at top card, if it's Bowsers, you add it to your hand. Now we've got more Bowsers in the deck, so the success rate is higher. Now, there's a card I'll go into later which you could replace potentially, but there's also a 5k power on it as well. It's all part of the reason I'm not really looking to play the Cassata grade 1. Cassata can gain 10k if you draw a trigger. This card gains 5. Sure, it's a bit less, but I feel like there's maybe more efficient ways to try and gain power. Maybe just consolidate the best of both cards, which is the 5k power and using something else. You can also do it with Trifle, this card. So if you call this off Trifle, you might see another card that's Bowsers, then you might just use this to reveal the next card in. So it's really nice with Trifle as well. Then we've got 4 copies of Marmalade. So Marmalade is the Perfect Guard. You can draw a card if you have Hardy in your hand. It's a bit like the D-Series Perfect Guards, but a bit better. But you have to have another copy from the drop zone. So obviously that's why we play 4. We're not mixing it with so much with the trigger Perfect Guards. You can play the odd draw or crit or whatever if you want to do that. That's not a bad idea. But yeah, generally it's just handy to be able to drop a copy and then just be able to draw if your hand is that low. And it makes it so you're never in a situation where you're just auto-losing. Then there's 2 copies of Panatone. So this is what I wanted to combine with Torijas. Rather than using Cassata, I'd rather use Panatone. She can also give you Soul as well, which is sometimes handy. But being able to combine that 10k buff, stack your deck, and also be able to kind of make the best of both worlds, really. I just think this might be better than Cassata in a lot of situations, more so. And also just a decent random call as well. So Overtrigger, for obvious reasons, is just too good. Imagine you use this with Trifle, and your opponent doesn't have pseudo Perfect Guards. That's kind of useful. We're not playing Wakahiro in the G zone, by the way, because I think that card is dodgy anyway in general. But I just think the other choices we have are safer and more reliable. Then there's 3 Totos. So Toto's the Stride fodder. It's just nice to have access to them. We're not even playing Bamkuchen in this list, so you can play Bamkuchen. It's not a bad choice. Honestly, the bit that put me off is the fact you have to actually place from hand, because there's a lot of cards. Well, there's a few cards in this deck that actually superior call from the deck, so that did turn me off a little bit. 4 Sister Muffins, so Bow Sister Muffins. This is a counter charge 2 on attack, also gives 3k to a unit. So using it with Momo is kind of helpful as well. Then there's, and this is actually one I'm not very sure about, 4 copies of Psychic Bird. So the thing that I want to mention in this video, besides the errata thing that I mentioned earlier, is the whole trigger optimization thing. I'm not convinced that 8 crits is the way, and I've been needing to do more testing on this. I'm actually thinking that it's worth mixing in Battle Sister Ginger, maybe. You could use that as a target for Torijas. Of course, my whole logic with Torijas is that it made more sense to just leave the trigger on top in more situations and just sack it, basically. But maybe it would be handy to have more 10k triggers as well. So 10k power is handy because you've got the Trifle, and Trifle is basically Sentinel Restrict. But the thing is, you can make a lot of really weak numbers. Even the Dragon King, that card can just sack triggers from your deck. It's not really as great. I'm not sure at this point, like Psychic Bird's usefulness is kind of diminishing as well, because you're getting more cards now that kind of work more reliably on their own, like as in normal use, and they work on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. So it just feels like the deck doesn't need to rely as much on Psychic Birds as they used to, if that makes any sense. So that's why I'm thinking it might be safe to just cut this and play Ginger instead. And then 4 heals, obviously the grade 3 heals, because, well, you can play the Balsa's Tail actually. The only real reason to play this is if you happen to draw into it, you can give 10k to your Vanguard or -2 crits if your opponent high rolls you. But honestly, the grade 3 icon, I don't think even the grade 3 icon matters anymore. Obviously, the damage adding can be useful because Fromage Reverse is an act skill, unlike the original Fromage. So before, what you could have had is you could be on 0 damage, and then your opponent can just like watch you use Balsa's Fromage and not draw 2 cards because Fromage was on place. But Reverse is actually an act skill, so you can play around now with Reverse and the heal together. But honestly, I think even Balsa's heals are actually a good consideration, so you could consider playing that too. The defense is okay actually in its deck, so you can go for that. Then, moving on to the next set of cards we have for the G-Zone. 2 copies of Stolen, so this is more so a first drop, but you can use her late game as well if the situation suits it. You can basically just, well, you can Soul Charge with it, which is nice. But you stack your deck, basically. It's like Fromage, except it's based on every Balsa's Rearguard instead of based on every different name Balsa's on the field. Now, the reason why you may want to play this over the Dragon King sometimes is because the Dragon King places the triggers before drive. So this card, what's handy about it is that, yeah, you're not gaining as much hand advantage and everything, but you are basically making 2 attacks lethal. So that's kind of useful to still have access to in your deck. I decided not to play Moroi because I feel like Moroi is overshadowed by a lot of other options now. And it's just harder for me to find situations to use it. But also, Gelato was actually in this deck until now. So Gelato is basically like a 3+1. You can search the top X amount of cards in your deck for every Balsa you have on the field. And obviously, with Dragon King, I saw less use for it. But that being said, Dragon King does force you to call normal units. So if you use Dragon King and you see Perfect Guards, you do have to call the Perfect Guards. But I'm not really sure how bad that really is because this deck can actually get too many Perfect Guards as well. So it might not be like the worst thing in the world. And if you call over that Perfect Guard, I guess that's not too bad because you can just get that PG in your drop zone and then set off the condition of the next Marmalade that you use. So it's not too bad, but Gelato I think is also now kind of a weak choice because I think this card, as much as I really like this card, I did feel like it maybe made some stuff a bit less relevant now, a few strides. Then we've got 2 Sterling Witch Momos, so you play 2 just in case of the Link Joker matchup, which I've never done before. And also, well, I've played against Link Joker, but just not with this, I don't think. I may have had 1 or 2 games, just forgot about it, but yeah, it's usually with Genesis I seem to go against Link Joker, if anything. Momo's handy because of Fromage getting draw 2, but also you could always use this in any OTC deck. It doesn't matter if your Vanguard has an on-place draw 2. Even in Susano I still play it. So this card is handy if you just want to cheese out some games and just kind of seize an opportunity. So very handy for that. Obviously you need to make sure you have some hand in the first place before you can use it, which is why this is not a stride you can rely on because of the fact that it relies on hand. But if you're lacking hand, or if you just want to build some hand or advantage or anything, Dragon King's also good. He can basically just check a bunch of cards out of your deck. Usually like 3. It would be 3 on the first stride, but then later on it becomes more because it's basically every face-up card in your G-Zone +2. And as I mentioned, if you see Perfect Guards, normal units as in, you have to call them onto the field. And then you just apply all the triggers and add them to your hand, which is always handy. Can't go wrong there. It's generally a safe card as well. And actually, another reason I was going to say, like, Balsister Ginger, the 10k crit trigger I mentioned, is more worth it because of cards like this, but also we're not playing Ichikishima and Amaterasu engine in this deck, so we might want more 10k triggers so we can try and damage check them, because damage checking triggers is actually very effective in the current format right now if you can do multiple, because there's a certain deck, clan called Spike Brothers, and there's this whole galley combo which is a nightmare. It's actually like insanely aggressive. Like almost no deck in the game can guard against it when it's going off properly. It's usually damage triggers, I think, that can do something. So next we have 4 Ichikishima. Ichikishima is handy if you want to get guard restrict and try and have a chance of actually closing the game, because to be fair, there's a lot of defense creep, and Oracle Think Tank hasn't really been keeping up when it comes to offensive push. It's a triple attack deck a lot of times. You can build it to have multiple attacks, but they're kind of very weak. A lot of times it's too much setup if you want to make it any good. Then we've got 1 copy of Octagonal Magus. So this is just an option. It's not as strong in this deck as it is in Susano, but it's handy in case you see an opportunity to use it, or if you think the risk is worth it. Then there's Dismal, just to play around stuff like Gilgal, or to protect a Q rearguard. And then there's 2 Amaterasus. This one is much easier to justify playing because you're not using Ichikishima and Amaterasu in your main deck, so you don't really care about revealing the top card or not. So I didn't really use this card much in the Susano deck, because the thing is that if you're checking top card and then you just see Amaterasu Ichikishima, you basically just wasted G guard and you have to leave on top. Now, to be fair, you can just use Octagonal Magus if you have a second G guard. You can just use that for your second heal that you drop to rectify that problem, of course. That's always the lineup play. But usually you just want to use Balsister Bavrois, because that way if you do actually see something, you're actually going to reveal it as well. And a lot of attacks aren't really going to demand too much shield anyway in one go. Like, usually this is more efficient for guarding. It's a counterblast 1 though, but you've got Muffin in this deck which can counter charge, so that can help too. And Trifle, by the way, can also call Muffin out as well. So that's more or less it for the prototype V-Clan collection or P-Clan collection deck profile. It looks fun and I can't wait to try it out, and I hope you guys have a fun time with it too. But other than that, just keep a lookout for more deck profiles. I will be doing some more. I am trying to make time now. I've had a lot of things going on in my personal life, so it's caused it to be a bit harder for me to do any sort of deck building and theory crafting and so on, which is why I've kind of slowed down compared to what I was planning to do. But things are sort of stabilizing a little bit. I'm not sure how much worse things can get, but until then, I will see you guys later. Goodbye.